Hello everyone and welcome to Senior Susie Stamps. Today is the last day for the Make With Me for Christmas 2026 series. And so I'm using a paper that I created in Canva, and it is Away in a Manger is the name of this paper. If you would like to have a copy, please email me. The email address is in the description box below, and that is the only way I can send it to you. It's 2 pages this week. And I'm going to show you some cards, first of all, that I've made with this paper, and then we're going to make one together. There's a lot of nice Christmas-related sentiments here that you can cut into 1/2 inch. And these smaller images, what I have used is a 1 1/4 or 1 inch punch, depending upon the application that I want, where I wanted to put these, and that seems to work really well for just a little accent on the inside. Let me show you some cards. Oh, there's also this page here that has the inside sentiment. If you like it, please go ahead and use it. Let me show you the cards that I have made with this paper and how they were made. This is the first one. Very, very, very simple. It has a black liner that is 5 1/4 by 4, and then there's just the center cut out of the original artwork, and it is 3 3/4, and this one just happens to be 4 inches, so it's 3 3/4 by 4. And then I took the little sentiment "Joy to the World" and I backed it with a little white, and I put a single solitary gem in with my Books Up by Hand PVA glue. And then this is the inside, a little sentiment and the Away in a Manger and the little circle punch up on the top. Very simple card, very quick if you're making a bunch of cards, and nice to have on hand, especially for like a spare card. Now here's another one. And this is an equally simple card. It's a single cut panel that's raised up on some foam, so it gives it a little interest. The Away in the Manger is kind of tucked up underneath that foam panel there. I put my little gem on the star, and then I don't know if you can see it or not, but there is some glitter glue in the moon rays, or in the star rays here, all the way out that way. And the inside of this card is another very simple one. This is a different sentiment from a different printout that I'll show you next week, but I just did the little circle punch for the inside to tie the front into it. And let me see. I think I had to trim this one down just a little bit. Where'd my ruler go? Oh, here we are. So this is a panel that is 3 inches wide, and I believe it's 5 1/4, 5 3/8. I adjusted the size. These were all prototype cards, and so I adjusted the size on that image up just a little bit so you wouldn't have to trim your card down if you want to make one like this. Let's see. Here's another one. Very, very simple card. It's just the panel with some rounded edges. I put a heavy layer of black pen on that, and then I don't know if you can see it or not, but the Mary and Joseph figures and a little bit of the front landscape here is cut up into one fussy cut unit and put up on some foam. And then I just glued the Away in the Manger onto that elevated piece, and I put a single gem in the front of that star, and then this is the inside of that card using the sentiment that came with this paper, and another Oh Holy Night on the inside, Away in a Manger on the outside. Okay, let's step it up one more time here. And this one is a die cut rectangle, and I used let's see, what are these? These are from Lawn Fawn, and they're stitched rectangle stackables. And I used the second one down on this one, as well as one of the smaller ones. I think it was this one right here, which is actually the second one up from the smallest one. So the second one down and the second one up. I did the card front landscape, and then I did the image that I popped up in kind of a portrait, and that gives it a little more interesting feature that way. And I don't know if you can tell it or not, but my Oh Holy Night is snuggled up underneath that. See, right down in here? It goes underneath where I've popped it up, and that really helps that card show very, very nicely. And of course, there's that gem in the middle of the star, and then this is the inside of the card. Let's see. Here's another card, and it's kind of got a little shadow box going on there, and it makes it a very interesting card. There are 5 elevated strips here, and you need to make sure that your center strip is in the center of your focal image. So we'll make this card today. And again, it's not hard, and I used some 1/4-inch foam on these cards today for the sentiment, and for sure on these elevated 1/2-inch strips I used 1/4-inch foam. It just makes it a lot easier. Here's the inside of that card. Very simple and easy to do, and this is not a difficult layout to fix. Obviously there's a black layer that is 5 1/4 by 4, and then I've cut the main image down to 3 3/4 by 5. Let's look at one more card, or maybe two. Sorry. This is one. I had this white panel on my desk left over from something else, I don't know what. So I did a full-size layer of black on the front of the card. And this was one of the first cards that I made because I didn't have the star rays, and you'll notice that this little star here in the middle is just a little bit different. See, I put a little white back in behind all of these, and in the printed copy that you'll get is also got a little white back in there. But I wanted some additional gold coming in for the bright star, so I went back and redid the paper just a little bit for us. But anyway, I had this white piece where I had cut a circle out of, so I just put it on an embossing folder, and then I did my ink drag. You've seen me do this lots and lots on this channel. I drug black ink this way, and then I drag it back that way. And then I took a little bit of gray on a blending brush and toned down that white so that it looks like weathered wood. And this little deckled edge circle die comes from Craft Addiction UK, and I'll try to leave a link to that in the description box below. But this is the inside of that card, and it makes it just a very nice, easy card to send that has got some good structure to it. Now let's look at this last card. And this one uses some pattern paper underneath an oval die, and that is fancy edged ovals, and it's the largest one. I think these are from Spellbinders. Yeah, they are. So this is the die that I used for this card, and I just had some small image design paper that had the black and tan color in it, so that's what I used. I cut my single image and I put a gem on. This is a 1/2 inch elevated up on that 1/4 inch foam, and then this card opens up this way, so I put some of that designer paper here and used some here, and this sentiment came from another set of sentiments, but you can see it finishes up nicely and it stands up beautifully to display for your recipient. So let's get started, and we'll make this card a side fold card, but I'm going to put the fold at the top, and I need a piece of black to line that with, so I'm going to cut my black piece to the first layer, and that would be, say it with me, 4 by 5 1/4. There we go. And then I'll put these little bits and bobs back in my black scrap piece over there. And that will be helpful for some other little project. So I'm just going to glue this down and we'll get the card base ready to use then. And there we go. And so then I'm going to go back to one of these panels that has the two side by side, and they're lined up for us. And I'm just going to use my guillotine cutter and cut right along the edge there. And it should be on my trimmer 5 7/8. And all we're doing is creating an edge that we can stack, and we know they're going to be in the same position. That's what's important here. And then I'm going to trim my white border off just at the very edge. And I'm going to move up and trim my other card off just at the very edge. And then you see you can stack these and be relatively assured, if you were careful in your cuts, that these will, you can cut them now with a single die and they will stack for you nicely with those 1/2 inch cuts that we're going to do. So let me get my second layer down and we'll start. Now, one thing you want to do is make sure that you have the top corner lined up and that you don't get them out of whack that way, because that's very important. In fact, you may just want to put you a little tiny piece of tape on there, because we're going to set this die down far enough. It'll go down about like this, so we can put a little piece of tape here and wrap it around and make sure that that's good and stable that way. And then we're going to put our cutting die on right about like so, I think. I'm going to try to get an even border here and here. Looks like it needs to go that way just a tines. There we go. And then I'm going to use some repositionable tape to tape that down securely. And I'll run this through my die cutting machine, and it should cut both layers. The paper that I put through my printer is 65 pound, and it's an accent smooth white paper. So I'm going to run this through and I'll be right back. All right, here we are. Looks like it didn't quite cut that all the way because the tape was on the back. There we go. Okay. I'll pull my die back and put it back on my little magnet here. I've showed you all this before, but we might have some new viewers. This is a lucite frame that I just put a magnet on. I've had this for years. I made it way back when we were still at the farm, so it works very, very well. And I just leave it set over there for collecting my dies when I'm in the middle of a project like this. So now what we want to do is take one of these two panels. We get them separated out here. And that's the next layer that goes down on this card. So let's get that glued down. And you'll see how easy these cards are to put together. And there we are. Now, let's look at this piece, because this is the one they're going to want to cut into strips. And if we just start cutting without any consideration for where the middle is, that's where you're going to get into trouble. So this piece is 5 inches wide, and what we want to do is cut a 1/4 inch strip off the outside of that, right here like this. So that's the first cut. And then we're going to cut 1/2 inch strips. So the second cut will be 4 1/4. And let's just keep these in order, okay? and then 3 3/4. There we go. And 3 1/4. And then we're just going to lay them right back out here the way they come off the paper cutter. And then 2 3/4. And 2 1/4. So it's 3/4, 1/4. There we go. And then 1 3/4. And that gets Mary. 1 1/4. Three-quarters. And then we're going to cut, because it's going to be easier this way, we're going to turn and cut it at 1/2. It's going to be too hard to cut 1/4 inch. You follow me? So basically we're just going to turn it and cut that other 1/4 inch off the edge. Right there like that. And this. Okay, so that's all the cuts that we need for the outside. And here they all are. And you see, this is the way, oops, don't get them out of order now. We don't want to do that. There we are. So, okay, now we can take these two edges and throw them away. And we're going to use, starting from the left, we're going to use 1, pull 2, 3, pull 4, 5, pull 6, 7, pull 8, and 9. And you end up with 5 strips. So these are pretty much waste. I suppose you could use the back of them for something, but you know, at some point you just got to let stuff go. So now what we're going to do is flip them over and keep them in order. It'd just be easier for you. It's not critical to keep these in order because you're going to find out that you're just going to lay them down on top of that original piece that's over here. But what I want to do then is to put some foam on them. And what I do on mine is I foam up to about 1/4 inch or so from the top and the bottom. And you don't need to cover this entire strip. If you'll just use this 1/4 inch tape that you've probably got in your stash, or if not, you can use some dimensionals, or you can cut your own strips, but just cut them kind of narrow where they don't show so much underneath the sides of these 1/2 inch pieces that we're going to glue back on. Okay? So that's just easy to do. I got that one just a tiny bit too long. Let me trim that off. There we go. And so now then we can start peeling the tape backing off and placing these where they go. And you'll need to watch now. Look for markers. Like this one has this little spot here and here. So that's what we're going to do. And you see the little star here and here. So just be careful and take your time and don't get too invested in the position until you double check everything and make sure it looks right to you. And remember, you're going to set it about 1/4 inch in, and there's a starting point right there. So see how that works? Okay. And then the second one moves over about 1/2 inch. And again, look for your markers and where you want to put this so that it looks right when it's put down. And don't press down on it until you're sure, and then go ahead and put it down and you'll be fine. And then the middle one is going to have the star. It may not be exactly centered. It kind of depends on where the die cut ended up, but it's good enough, and people understand that it's a handmade card when they get it, and they will really appreciate this one. Trust me, I'm telling you they will. It's a beautiful card when you get it finished. All right, and then here's one of the wise men and part of the manger here. So there's that one, and it matches up nicely. And then we have the final one. And there we go. Right like this. And you want to check and make sure your tops and your bottoms are all lined up before you put any pressure on that foam tape. There we are. There, right like that. And now then, I'm going to put a little glue on my star right there in the center. And I'm going to get one of these gold gems and put it in its place right in the middle of the star. And there we go, right like that. So now, the next thing we'll want to do is to trim out a sentiment and do the inside panel here. So what I want to do is, let's see, what did I use on the original one? Where did I put it? Oh my goodness. Oh, here it is. Let's see, I used Away in a Manger up on the top here. So what I'm going to do is to cut this panel here to get to my sentiments. Here we go. And I'm going to cut it at 5 7/8 because that gives me the full panel that way. And I'll set this aside. And then I'm going to cut these off. This one happens to come off at 4 3/4. And that may vary a little bit depending upon your printer and how it printed. We'll use this in just a second. And then I want to do a cut here for Away in a Manger. And let me show you what I'm going to do. I hope you can see this. But you see this little silver band on my trimmer? That's a 1/2 inch. I'm going to put my Away in a Manger in the middle of that and make my first cut that way. And if you have 1/2 inch cutting dies to do your sentiments, you can use those on these. And that would be fine. But you see how nice that comes out that way? And then what I'm going to do is figure out how big of a piece I want this to be. And I'm going to trim it there. And then I'm going to turn and make this a 2-inch sentiment and see how that looks. So this is 2 inches by 1/2 inch. Okay? And there we go. And you'll have sentiments left over for your stash. I just went ahead and gave you a bunch of them. So we're going to glue this down, and we're going to put some foam underneath the center pieces where the sentiment won't collapse. So we're going to put glue on the outside edges and just a little bit in the middle. And then we're going to place our sentiment up here so that it's equidistant on here and here. And then I'm going to come back to my little foam, and I've got a little tiny piece here that I can use off of one of those cuts that I cut too long a minute ago. And so I'm going to slip that right up underneath here and just press down on it. And that stabilized that section there. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing over here. And our sentiment then won't collapse when it's going through the mail. And if it sticks on you, just be patient. Be patient. And try again. There we go. Okay. So that's the front of the card. Now, let's do the inside, and that's where these panels are going to come in. And I'm going to cut this. So my first cut, I'm just going to cut this in half for my first cut and cut it at 4 1/4. There we go. And now what I want to do is line up my paper, and I've got a little shadow going off of this side here, so I'm going to take that off. There we are, and it's a little offside, so it's going to be a little smaller than 3 3/4 by 5, so I'm going to make it 4 3/4 by 3 1/2. And let's see how that works. It's 4 3/4 by 3 1/2 is one of the A2 size layers. If you'll look in your workbook now and check your layer size, you'll notice that. And while we're talking about the workbooks, I do still have some of the workbooks, so if you're interested, I'm still sending them out. And the complete workbook, I'm almost sold out of, so we will not do a reprint on any of these. But if you're interested and you'd like to have one, you can contact me in the email below. So here we go. Right like this, and see how nice of an image that turns out to be. And then let's pull this sheet, and I'm going to get my 1 1/4 inch punch, and I'm going to punch one of these images out. And you know, you're not going to push it all the way up like that. You're going to bring it down so that the white on the top doesn't show. And that gives you a really nice little image to use. And we can put that on the upper part here and glue it down. There we go. Get my tweezers. And then I'm going to put this in the center of that card, directly above my sentiment here. And I'm going to look for an Oh Holy Night. Here we go. And this happens to be left over from another piece, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to center it over that 1/2 inch and make my first cut. And there we are. And then I'm just going to cut it at a 1/2 inch. And put that one up there, just like that. So, and I'm just going to center it in that area there. And so that's the inside of the card, and we've brought the outside in with our little circle punch. And this little elevated 5-strip scene has a lot of character to it. So let's look at these cards again. This is the original one, and this is the fancy fold. And you know, all I did was to take, I'll show you right quick. I just took a portrait style card and I scored it again right in half, which is 2 3/4. And then I folded this half back and forward and back and forward several times to make it flexible so it would move. And then I just glued my full panel onto the top of that and made a little kind of modified Z-fold card out of it that way. And I'm sure you've got some pattern paper scraps that will kind of go with this paper, and it just makes a really pretty card. So there we go. These are the 3 that I would consider to be the more intricate, fancier cards. And if you want to spend a little extra time on them, they're quite lovely, and I know the recipient would love them. But these other cards were very, very simple and easy to put together. They don't require a lot of dies to cut. These 3 have no dies on them. This one has a little fussy cutting on it. This one is a cutting die. The second one down and the second one up on those rectangular stackables there. So I hope you've enjoyed this series with me of Make With Me cards, and that if you want your set of papers, you've either already asked for it or you'll go ahead and send me an email and ask for it now. Now, next week, I am not going to be with you because I have another obligation next week that's going to take up most of my time. So I'll see you all in a couple of weeks, and we'll start a new series then. We're not through with Christmas cards, but I think we'll take a little break from them and try to get into something that's a little more artsy, if you will. So I'll see you then and have a great 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.